Dispatch 24, eyes on our guy, black male, mid-40s, army camo. Nice costume. Halloween's early.
I'm not pretending. I'm serving.
You're making a mistake, officer.
Officer Daniels, a police officer who already had a long history of racial complaints, walked up to a black U.S. veteran at a gas station. His eyes narrowed and his voice turned harsh as he accused the man of pretending to be a military officer. He spoke in a loud, commanding tone, demanding identification, fully convinced that no black man could ever hold such a high rank. What Daniels didn't realize was that the man standing in front of him was not just any soldier. He was a highly respected veteran with many years of service, a uniform decorated with medals, and a completely clean record. Every detail on his ID would prove he was telling the truth, and if Daniels made even one wrong move, it wouldn't just expose his bias, it could instantly destroy his career, turning his confidence into a career-ending mistake. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you definitely don't want to miss. The veteran David Thompson, 38 years old, stood quietly at the gas pump, filling his car while wearing his neat, well-pressed military uniform. A U.S. Army veteran with almost 20 years of service, David had earned multiple awards for bravery and leadership, honors that many officers only dream of achieving in their lifetime. His posture was straight, his hands steady, his eyes focused forward, habits shaped by years of discipline, training, and service. Today, he was just running a normal errand, completely unaware that his simple task was about to turn into a test far more difficult than anything he had faced on the battlefield. As he pumped gas, David mentally went over his plans for the day, check the oil, pick up groceries, go home. He had no idea that Officer Daniels was watching him closely from a distance, studying every move, twisting normal behavior into something suspicious. In Daniels' mind, every small action David made seemed to support his unfair assumptions. Yet to any reasonable person, it was simply a veteran going about his everyday routine. Mark Daniels, 42, had been a police officer for 15 years. Over time, complaints about his behavior had slowly piled up, mostly ignored and quietly filed away. He was known for being aggressive, quick to judge, and unwilling to admit when he was wrong, especially when the person in front of him didn't match the image he believed was right. The moment he saw David in uniform, a black man holding a noticeable rank, his mind immediately labeled him a fraud. The idea that a black man could truly earn that position never fully registered in his thinking. His bias shaped every thought, every word, and every decision he was about to make. Daniels pulled his patrol car forward, stopping in a way that blocked the gas pump, clearly trying to show control. "Step away from the car," he shouted. "I need to see your identification now." His voice sounded official, but his eyes showed doubt and disbelief. Other customers at the gas station began to notice, some slowing down, others stopping, sensing the tension in the air. Even though they didn't know the full story behind the moment unfolding in front of them, David stayed calm. He moved slowly and carefully, reaching for his military ID, his hands steady despite the pressure and intimidation. "Officer Daniels," he said respectfully, "I am who I say I am. Here is my identification." He handed over the card, clean, official, and completely legitimate. Daniels took it, barely giving it a real look. In his mind, he was already sure he would find something wrong, something that would prove his belief. Daniels walked back to his patrol car with the ID in hand, muttering to himself. David remained standing where he was, posture unchanged, calm and composed, a sharp contrast to the tension building around them. Whispers from nearby customers grew louder, and a few people pulled out their phones, sensing that something unfair was happening. Each passing second felt heavier, as if the air itself was charged with what was about to happen next. The officer ran the ID through his system, eyes locked on the screen as the confirmation flashed back green. Everything checked out. But Daniels refused to accept it. "There's a mistake," he said out loud, even though no one else could see the screen. His bias twisted the truth, convincing him that David was still lying, still pretending. David's jaw tightened slightly, not out of anger, but out of focus and control. He knew this moment mattered. Every move he made now would be important, not just for himself, but as proof of whether fairness could stand up against blind prejudice. Daniels straightened himself and stormed back toward David, his voice louder than before. "You're coming with me," he ordered, leaving no space for discussion. David looked back at him calmly, his eyes steady, fully aware that the situation was about to escalate. Daniels had no idea how serious the consequences of his actions could become. This was the moment where the first act came to an end. The quiet before the storm. A moment where bias was about to meet undeniable proof, and where a decorated veteran would show that preparation, patience, and true authority cannot be bullied or intimidated. Officer Daniels' grip on the situation tightened, his voice sharp and controlled and commanding. His voice, echoing across the gas pumps. Step back from the vehicle. You're not leaving until I get answers. He pointed toward his squad car, his fingers tapping together as if counting down the moment before things escalated. Nearby phones captured the tension as it unfolded in real time. An officer confronting a man who hadn't done a single thing wrong. Still, to Daniels, every small movement looked suspicious, even criminal. "Sir, I've already shown you my identification," came the calm reply. The voice was steady and controlled, not shaking under the pressure of authority being used against him. Daniels leaned in, closer, shrinking the space between them, as if standing near would force obedience. "I don't care. You're not going anywhere." "Not until I personally verify this," he said, his words sharper now, filled with silent threats, detention, embarrassment, arrest. His hand moved toward his radio, fingers hovering, clearly signaling he might call for backup. As Daniels raised his voice again, customers nearby whispered behind their hands. The unease was clear. More phones appeared, recording from different angles, as quiet comments passed through the small crowd. One bystander's hand shook slightly as they pointed toward the officer, muttering about past incidents, their concern revealing the growing imbalance in the situation. Daniels noticed them and shot an irritated glance in their direction. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't acknowledge the cameras. In his mind, his authority was unquestionable. "Move over there." Daniels shouted again, pointing toward the curb, placing the veteran where escape seemed impossible. Each step was enforced by the officer's looming presence. Every command came with sharp gestures, his tone leaving no room for disagreement. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Quiet talk about the officer's reputation began to surface. Mentions of past complaints, stories of someone quick to escalate situations. These comments passed quietly from person to person. Daniel seemed completely unaware, convinced the man in front of him was simply refusing to cooperate. The response remained calm and deliberate. "I'm cooperating," came the low, steady voice. Each word was clear and controlled, showing no anger or fear. Still, every command, every movement by the officer made the imbalance of power more obvious. The veteran kept his hands visible at all times, moving only to adjust the ID held loosely in front of him, making sure there was nothing Daniels could twist into an accusation. Yet Daniels continued. He circled him, leaned in, stared closely, searching for anything that could support his disbelief. A younger officer, standing slightly behind, shifted uncomfortably, his hand hovering over a notepad. He seemed there as support, but his eyes showed hesitation. He could sense this was going too far. A small, almost unnoticed nod toward the veteran hinted that he understood the imbalance. Daniels ignored it, raising his voice again, drawing more attention from the growing crowd. People stopped walking. Phones stayed raised. Whispers grew louder. The officer's authority was now on display for everyone to see, along with his bias. Still, Daniel seemed blind to the scrutiny building around him. The veteran's patience showed in small ways. A slow breath out, a straighter stance, calm eyes meeting the officer's glare without flinching. Every response remained precise and disciplined, a quiet refusal to let intimidation break his composure. But with every second that passed, the pressure increased, the restriction, the delay, the expectation of public humiliation. The imbalance pressed in, silent but heavy. Each display of authority felt larger than the last. Daniels muttered under his breath, fingers tapping against his radio. "We'll figure this out." "We always do," he said. The line carried confidence but also stubborn pride, the same attitude that had led to complaints before. The crowd noticed it immediately, the same rigid thinking, the same refusal to accept verification from anyone else. A man convinced he could never be wrong. Then something changed. As the veteran adjusted his ID, a small document slipped from his hand. An official verification receipt. It fluttered briefly before landing on the ground. A bystander gasped softly, drawing Daniel's attention. He bent down quickly, grabbed it, and for the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. His posture shifted. He paused, just for a moment. It was subtle, but the cameras caught it. That was the moment Daniels realized this situation was no longer fully under his control. Time seemed to hang still. His eyes stayed fixed on the document, frozen in a hesitation that hadn't existed before. The murmurs around them faded into quiet observation. Phones continued recording, capturing every small movement of a man who had believed his authority was absolute. There was no shouting, no dramatic reaction, Just a long pause. A pause that marked the first crack in the control Daniels thought he could never lose. The verification in his hand was undeniable. Every line, every detail confirmed the truth. The identification card was official and untouched, clearly showing name, rank and service record. The numbers, seals, and lettering left no room for doubt. Another look at the system showed the same result. Everything matched perfectly. Nothing was missing. Nothing was fake. This was reality, clear and unquestionable. Daniel's shoulders tightened. The voice that had been loud and commanding dropped into a lower, uncertain tone. His eyes briefly shifted toward the younger officer standing nearby. A small nod in return confirmed what Daniel still struggled to admit. The truth was clear. One witness, still quietly recording, whispered to the person beside them, "He's actually real. Look at that ID." Another voice followed, shaky but sure. "Yeah, that's legit. That's his rank." The words spread softly through the crowd, not as gossip, but as confirmation. The balance of power changed without a single raised voice. Daniels blinked. The tension in his jaw slowly eased, replaced by understanding. The orders he had shouted, the threats of detention, the demand for control suddenly meant nothing. His stance softened. His hands lowered slightly. His posture relaxed, just enough to show that the certainty driving this confrontation was slipping away, replaced by a careful, almost offensive caution. The veteran's behavior never changed. He remained calm and steady, every movement controlled, professional and deliberate. There was no victory in his expression, no look of revenge or satisfaction. His authority showed itself through restraint, through the quiet understanding that facts alone were enough to earn respect. Every second of silence reinforced one clear truth. Control cannot be forced. It can only be proven. Another officer arrived late from the edge of the gas station. After a quick look at the ID, their posture immediately shifted. A small nod followed, subtle but clear enough for Daniels to notice. That silent acknowledgement confirmed the veteran's legitimacy without a single word being spoken. In that moment, reality fully settled in for Daniels. His bias had clouded his judgment. His assumptions were wrong, and his actions had crossed a line. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was cautious and controlled. "Carry on," he said, the harsh tone completely gone. His movements were careful now, his hands restrained, making sure not to overstep. The aggression from earlier was replaced by something else, an awareness that the man standing in front of him was fully authorized, respected, and legitimate in every sense. Every belief Daniels had relied on, the suspicion, the doubt, the bias, collapsed under undeniable facts. The bystanders kept their phones raised, no longer out of protest, but as documentation. The murmurs shifted into quiet nods and brief confirmations. "That's correct." Each small affirmation strengthened the veteran's authority. The moment settled into clarity, reality standing firmly behind the calm and professional presence of a man who had been unfairly challenged. The imbalance of power didn't disappear instantly, but it had clearly reversed. Daniels became aware of the consequences without a word being said. A swallowed breath, a quick glance toward the nearest exit, a slight change in posture. Internal reports, complaints, and reviews now loomed over him. The realization was silent but final. The control he once claimed no longer belonged to him. The veteran accepted his identification back calmly, without argument or comment. There was no confrontation, no accusation, no need for explanation. His presence alone communicated authority. Every small movement, every subtle adjustment reflected years of discipline and service, proving that respect does not require shouting or force. Daniel's eyes lingered briefly, noticing the confirming nod from the second officer, the watching witnesses, and the soft hum of recording phones. The truth was now public, verified, and undeniable. Any further action without accepting that reality would only make things worse. As the veteran prepared to move on, phones still recording and quiet confirmation still spreading, Daniels made his first procedural correction. His hands stayed visible. His gestures were controlled. He stepped back slightly, signaling that the confrontation was over. Yet the weight of what had nearly happened showed in his hesitation. He had made it through the moment, but he knew how close he had come to serious consequences. When the veteran finally walked away, the pause had lasted long enough for everyone to absorb the shift. Cameras captured everything. Whispers and short confirmations echoed softly. Nothing needed exaggeration. The facts spoke for themselves. Daniel's authority had been challenged and corrected by the truth he had tried to ignore. Internally, understanding settled in. Quiet, undeniable, a swallowed acknowledgement of his mistake, a careful, almost defensive change in how he carried himself. This was how the power shift revealed itself. The consequences hadn't arrived yet, but the foundation was set. As the veteran moved toward his car, the whispers grew clearer. That's his rank. That's official. Another officer glanced at the ID once more, a small gesture that sealed the reality. The shift in power was complete, silent, factual, and unquestionable. The moment ended with one unspoken truth. Procedures would follow. Reports were unavoidable. Recording device had not stopped. By morning, the story would extend far beyond the gas station. The verification, the authority, and the mistake were all documented and impossible to deny. Justice had not yet been delivered, but its process had already begun. Internal reviews were launched immediately after the confrontation, supported by gas station footage. Multiple witnesses, including officers on scene, filed reports. Supervisors were informed, and the chain of command initiated a formal review. Internal affairs marked the incident as high priority, referencing Daniel's past complaints and the public nature of the encounter. Every action was logged, time-stamped, and archived to ensure accountability and proper procedure. Footage from bystander phones, body cameras, and gas station surveillance was examined carefully. Investigators compared each source, confirming timelines, actions, and statements as they happened. Department policies and engagement guidelines were reviewed to determine whether proper procedures had been followed when interacting with verified personnel. Each command issued each moment of hesitation, and every action taken by the officer was carefully recorded and compared against official procedures. Statements were gathered from everyone involved, including the officer, the veteran, secondary officers on scene, and witnesses who had either recorded or observed the incident. These statements were reviewed for consistency, and any differences were flagged for further review. Investigators looked at the situation as a whole, documenting not only what happened at the gas station, but also the officer's past behavior. The evidence revealed a repeated pattern of bias-driven assumptions, supporting the conclusions already shown in the video footage. As the investigation continued, supervisors and legal advisors within the department prepared formal recommendations. Department policies on verifying military personnel and proper engagement with uniformed individuals were reviewed closely. Deviations from required procedures during the incident were clearly noted. Each recommendation was carefully evaluated to ensure it followed both departmental standards and legal guidelines. The officer whose actions caused the escalation faced immediate administrative action. A formal suspension was issued while the final review was completed. Notices were sent through the officer's chain of command stating that any further misconduct would lead to termination. Internal Affairs documented the case in full, making sure all institutional protections and processes were applied correctly. When the investigation concluded, the review determined that the officer had violated department policy, misused his authority, and failed to accept verified identification. These actions were classified as serious breaches of both procedural rules and ethical standards. As a result, termination was carried out, removing the officer from active duty. No additional corrective measures were required, as the evidence and documentation made the decision final and binding. The department released public statements acknowledging the incident and outlining the steps taken to ensure accountability. The communication focused on verified facts, actions taken, policies enforced, and transparency in the process. Media coverage followed quickly, referencing the clear evidence and the officer's prior history of complaints. Reporting remained factual, highlighting professional and institutional responses rather than sensational details. The veteran returned to his normal routine without seeking attention. His actions remained consistent with his past conduct, calm, disciplined, and professional. He made no public statements claiming victory or demanding recognition. The facts had spoken for themselves, authority had been verified, and proper procedures had been restored. All interactions after the incident reflected restraint and a continued commitment to professional standards. Secondary officers who witnessed the encounter noted the veteran's composure and adherence to protocol during official debriefings. Their statements confirmed that professionalism was maintained under pressure, reinforcing the conclusion that institutional integrity had been upheld. The wider community response remained balanced. Observers, media outlets, and institutional stakeholders recognized the department's adherence to procedure and accountability. Brief statements from officials confirmed that corrective actions had been taken and that training programs were reviewed to prevent similar incidents in the future. Public understanding was shaped by the factual documentation, the transparency of the investigation, and the visible safeguards within the system. The final review included recommendations for updated verification procedures, mandatory refresher training on interaction with verified military personnel, and improved protocols to address bias-based assumptions during routine encounters. The documentation concluded that following these updates would reduce the chance of similar incidents and strengthen oversight within the department. In conclusion, the incident was fully resolved through documented procedure, enforcement of policy, and institutional accountability. Internal affairs ensured compliance, supervisors confirmed proper action, and the responsible officer faced clear consequences. The veteran maintained professionalism throughout, serving as a clear example of restraint under pressure. All footage, reports, and records were archived permanently. The department confirmed that every step, from reporting to final resolution, followed policy, legal requirements, and ethical standards. The entire process demonstrated the system's ability to respond effectively to misconduct while maintaining public trust. If you believe accountability should apply to everyone, no matter the badge, make sure you subscribe for stories like this.